Hey guys. Tonight we step quietly into a world that looks polished from the outside and bruising once you touch it. You're standing in the early morning chill of Imperial China. The kind of cold that seeps through silk like it isn't even trying. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls, slow, official, unimpressed by your nerves. You haven't done anything wrong yet, which is impressive, because you're already in trouble. This is the beginning of a life that promises refinement and delivers exhaustion. Honestly, you'd last about 3 days here before begging for a nap and decent snacks. You might think you could survive, people always do, but you probably wouldn't. The schedule alone would finish you off before the politics got a chance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there, because someone is falling asleep to this while you're just getting started. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in a line that pretends to be orderly. It's dawn, technically, though the sun hasn't committed to showing itself yet. You're one of dozens, maybe hundreds, of young women gathered for selection. This is a well-documented historical practice. Periodic concubine selections meant to replenish the imperial household. Drawing girls from across the empire. Families present it as an honor. Officials record it as routine. You experience it as a quiet theft. Your name is called, not asked for. You step forward because everyone else does. And because refusing isn't really an option people discuss out loud. The strange thing is how calm everything feels. No shouting, no chains, just layers of silk, murmured instructions, and the faint smell of ink and incense. You're examined like a piece of porcelain, teeth, posture, skin tone. One clerk notes your age with a brushstroke so casual it could ruin your life. There's a popular historical event folded into this moment. Imperial consort systems formalized over dynasties. Designed to control lineage and power. What's less discussed is how standardized the process became, down to the height ranges considered auspicious. Some historians still debate whether these standards were based more on superstition than aesthetics. But either way, you fit them well enough. Congratulations. That's the problem. As the line moves, you notice how quickly personal identity evaporates. You are no longer someone who slept in a familiar room last night. You're suitable. You're acceptable. You're quiet. Silence, you learn almost immediately, is your first skill. Loud emotions are for people with choices. You keep your eyes lowered, not out of humility, but because everyone else does. And imitation is the safest form of intelligence here. Somewhere behind you, a girl sniffles once and stops. Efficient. You make a mental note to practice that level of control. There's an odd, rarely mentioned fact about these selections. Many girls never see the emperor at all. They enter the palace system and spend years existing in administrative limbo. Training, waiting, aging. It's like being put on hold by history. You don't know this yet. Right now, you're still operating under the illusion that selection means immediacy. That things will happen quickly. They won't. Imperial time stretches differently. Like a meeting that could have been an email but somehow lasts a decade. You're escorted through gates that feel ceremonial in the way museums feel ceremonial, beautiful. echoing, and deeply uninterested in your comfort. The palace walls rise around you, clean and imposing. This is a place designed to impress visitors and contain residents. As you walk, you notice the sound of your own steps disappearing into stone. It's unsettling, like being absorbed. A guard clears his throat. That's the loudest sound in minutes. You'd laugh at how tense you are if laughing were still something you did. There's a historical detail people love to romanticize: the grandeur of the Forbidden City. The symmetry, the colors. What doesn't make the postcards is the constant surveillance. Even now, before you officially belong to anyone, eyes follow you, not hostile, just thorough. Some historians still debate how much autonomy lower-ranking palace women had during these early stages. From your perspective, autonomy feels theoretical, like an interesting concept you once heard about. You're given a room, not yours. Just temporarily assigned, sparse, clean. You sit on the edge of the bed because you're not sure you're allowed to lie down. No one told you not to. Which somehow feels worse. The air smells faintly of herbs and old wood. You wonder who slept here last. You wonder where she is now. The questions pile up, but answers are not a palace amenity. Later, though later is a flexible term, you're told to change into new clothing. This is where another odd fact slips in. New arrivals were often given standardized garments to strip away regional identity. Everyone starts looking the same on purpose. You smooth the fabric and think about how your mother fixed your collar before you left. That memory feels dangerously loud. You tuck it away. Survival here is about compartmentalization. Think of it as mental housekeeping, but with higher stakes. Night approaches without ceremony. No dramatic sunset. Just a gradual dimming. You lie down finally, staring at a ceiling you didn't grow up under. Your body is exhausted, but your mind keeps tapping you on the shoulder, asking if you're sure about this. You're not. That's fine. Certainty isn't required. Compliance is. Somewhere beyond your room, the palace continues breathing, footsteps, distant voices, the soft shuffle of routines older than everyone involved. You are now part of that rhythm, whether you feel ready or not. This first day doesn't end with clarity or comfort. It ends with waiting. Waiting becomes a skill, an art, even. As you drift towards sleep, one thought settles in, heavier than the rest. You didn't choose this life, but it has chosen you with impressive efficiency. Tomorrow, you'll start learning how to exist inside it. Tonight, you just try to rest. Because history doesn't pause, and it definitely doesn't tiptoe. And as your breathing slows, the palace seems to lean in, not threatening, just patient, ready to teach you exactly how brutal quiet can be. Wake before you mean to. Dragged out of sleep by a sound that isn't loud but is impossible to ignore. A wooden clapper strikes somewhere beyond the walls, measured. Indifferent. It's the palace reminding you that time here belongs to someone else. Your body feels heavy, like it's already learned the habit of restraint overnight. For a brief, foolish second, you expect to recognize the room. You don't. The ceiling stares back at you, unfamiliar and faintly stained, and the memory of yesterday settles onto your chest with practiced weight. You sit up slowly, because haste feels dangerous even when no one has told you why. Outside, footsteps pass, unhurried. You are not expected yet. That's the unsettling part. In the outer world, waiting usually comes with instructions. Here, waiting is assumed. You smooth the bedding, unsure whether neatness matters. It probably does. Everything probably does. Some historians still debate whether early impressions truly influenced a concubine's long-term fate. But you suspect the palace believes they do, and belief often becomes policy. Eventually, a woman enters without knocking. She's older, efficient, her face arranged into something neutral enough to survive decades here. This is your first guide. Though she'll never call herself that. She tells you to follow. And you do. Because the lesson of yesterday has already sunk in. Choice is now decorative. As you walk, she doesn't explain where you're going. Explanations are for equals. Instructions are for everyone else. The corridors seem longer in the morning. Light creeps in through latticed windows, cutting the halls into soft geometric shapes. It's beautiful in the way something expensive often is, designed to be admired from a distance. Up close, you notice the chill. Stone keeps secrets and cold equally well. You pass other women moving in similar lines. Eyes lowered, steps measured, no one speaks. The silence isn't enforced with threats. It's enforced with tradition, which is much harder to argue with. You're brought to a hall where training begins. Though it isn't called that. This is instruction, which sounds gentler. You're taught how to stand without seeming rigid, how to walk without noise, how to bow at angles that suggest respect but not ambition. It's exhausting in a way modern workouts would envy. Every movement is corrected, a wrist adjusted, a chin lowered. You learn quickly that the goal isn't perfection, it's uniformity. There's a widely known historical truth folded into this routine. Palace women were educated extensively in etiquette, music, and decorum. What's less commonly mentioned is how much of that education focused on erasure. Accents softened, gestures standardized. You stop moving like yourself and start moving like acceptable. Someone taps your shoulder lightly when you forget and turn too quickly. No anger, just correction. It's worse than anger. Honestly, anger would mean someone cares enough to feel it. At midday, you're given food, simple, balanced, measured. You eat quietly, aware that even chewing has a rhythm here. Across from you, another girl meets your eyes for half a second, then looks away. That was a risk, a small one, but still. You wonder if she'll remember your face later. You wonder if you should remember hers. Memory, you're starting to realize, can be dangerous. Attachments leave fingerprints. In the afternoon, you're taught silence more formally. When to speak, when not to. Mostly when not to. There's a lesson on listening behind screens, how to remain present without appearing curious. This connects to a common historical event, the architectural use of curtains and partitions in the inner palace. Designed to separate visibility from presence. You learn that hearing is often more important than seeing. You also learn that pretending not to hear is the more valuable skill. Some historians still debate how much informal information circulated through these quiet channels. From the way instructors linger on this lesson, you suspect it was a lot. By evening, your head aches, not from pain, exactly, but from containment. You are holding yourself together too carefully. When you're finally dismissed, the relief is so sharp it almost feels like guilt. Back in your room, you sit again on the edge of the bed. That habit is forming. You wonder how long it takes before habits become personality. As darkness settles, you replay the day. No dramatic cruelty, No raised voices. Just steady pressure. It's strangely effective. You think about modern life for a fleeting moment, notifications, choices, distractions, and almost laugh. Here, nothing competes for your attention. The palace has already won it all. Lying down, you realize something important. Today wasn't about preparing you to be seen. It was about preparing you to disappear smoothly into a system that runs best when no one resists. Tomorrow, you'll learn more. For now, you let your eyes close. Practicing stillness, because even sleep feels like something you should do correctly. The palace breathes around you again, patient as ever. You're beginning to understand that arrival wasn't a moment. It's a process, and it has only just started. You start to notice the sound of your own breathing more than anything else. It's too loud, you think, even though no one has said so. The palace has a way of convincing you that your very existence should be quieter. Morning arrives without warmth, ushered in by routine rather than light. You rise when expected, dress as instructed, and move before you're fully awake. This, apparently, is progress. Today's lessons revolve around stillness. Not the restful kind. The kind that feels like holding a glass of water so full you're afraid to blink. You're shown how to kneel for long periods without shifting your weight. How to keep your gaze lowered while remaining alert. It's an impressive physical feat disguised as etiquette. Somewhere in your modern brain, a voice suggests this would make an excellent, deeply unpleasant fitness trend. Imperial core stability. Perhaps, you suppress a smile before it escapes. A senior instructor circles the room as you practice. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Her presence carries authority built from decades of survival. When she stops behind you, you feel it before you hear her. A gentle tap corrects your posture. You adjust immediately. This is how discipline works here, not through fear exactly, but through anticipation. You begin correcting yourself before anyone else has to. Historically, this emphasis on silence and composure was a cornerstone of inner palace life. Concubines were expected to embody calm refinement at all times, reflecting well on the emperor's household. What's rarely emphasized is how emotionally exhausting that expectation was. Suppressing reactions becomes second nature. You learn to swallow surprise, irritation, even joy. Some historians still debate whether this emotional restraint was culturally valued or strategically enforced. From where you're standing, very still. By the way, it feels like both. Later, you're taught how to listen. Not just hear, listen selectively. Behind screens, doors, and thin walls, conversations drift like smoke. You're instructed on which tones signal danger, which suggest opportunity, and which mean absolutely nothing but still must be remembered. Forgetting the wrong detail can be costly. Remembering too much can be worse. It's a delicate balance, like trying to fall asleep while also needing to wake instantly if someone whispers your name. During a brief pause, you notice your hands resting in your lap. They look different already, calmer, less expressive. You used to talk with them, didn't you? That feels like a rumor now. The palace is very good at editing people down to essentials. And here, the essential quality is invisibility. There's a small, strange fact tucked into this phase of palace life. Some concubines practiced speaking as little as possible even in private. Believing silence would become instinctive. You're not told to do this. No one has to. The idea plants itself naturally. You test your voice later in your room, whispering a single word just to hear it. It sounds unfamiliar, like borrowing someone else's coat. In the evening, you attend a demonstration rather than a lecture. Two senior women perform a greeting ritual, precise, elegant, flawless. It's beautiful, objectively, but watching them, you sense how much of themselves has been sanded away to achieve that perfection. You wonder what they were like before. Loud, curious, annoying in small, human ways? The palace doesn't record that part. As night settles in, fatigue rolls over you in waves. Not physical exhaustion, something deeper. The tiredness of constant self-monitoring. You lie down and stare at the ceiling again, which is becoming a familiar habit. And think about how silence is no longer just something around you. It's something inside you now. Tomorrow, they'll teach you more. How to smile without warmth. How to exist without ripples. For now, you let the quiet hold you. Because resisting it would take energy you no longer have. The palace, satisfied, remains silent with you. By the fourth day, though counting days already feels like a rebellious hobby, you begin to notice faces rather than uniforms. It happens slowly, almost against your will. At first, everyone looked identical, lowered eyes, identical sleeves, carefully neutral expressions. Now, subtle differences creep in. A woman who blinks too often. Another who holds her shoulders like she's bracing for impact. You catch these details the way one notices cracks in a wall, quietly. And without comment. Today, you're introduced to the concept of separation without isolation. Screens, curtains, latticed partitions that allow sound to travel but obscure faces. You stand behind one now, listening as figures move on the other side. This is deliberate. The palace believes mystery prevents conflict. In reality, it just makes everyone more imaginative. You hear silk rustle, a throat clear, a faint laugh quickly swallowed. Your mind fills in the rest. It's much worse than seeing. This practice has a solid historical basis. The inner court relied heavily on architectural barriers to regulate interaction between concubines, servants, and authority figures. You're told it maintains propriety. What no one says aloud is that it also maintains plausible deniability. If you can't see someone, you can't easily accuse them. Some historians still debate whether this design reduced conflict or simply buried it deeper. From the tension in the room, buried seems more accurate. As you listen, you start recognizing voices. One is sharp, clipped, always confident. Another hesitates, as if every sentence requires permission. You don't know their names yet. Names aren't important, not officially. Still, your brain insists on sorting people into categories: dangerous, exhausted, hopeful, pretending not to care. You wonder which category you fall into now. Probably unremarkable, which feels like a small victory. There's a demonstration involving greetings performed behind screens. You're told to respond to cues you can't see: footsteps approaching, fabric shifting, a shadow moving across paper-thin silk. Timing matters. Too fast looks eager. Too slow looks disrespectful. You miss the cue once and feel heat crawl up your neck. No one scolds you. The silence afterward does the job perfectly. Later, during a short rest, you glimpse another concubine through a half-open partition. Just a fragment, an eye, a cheek, the edge of a mouth. She's studying you as intently as you're studying her. The moment lasts a second too long. She smiles, small and unreadable, then disappears. You replay it immediately, analyzing every millimeter. Congratulations. You're officially part of the problem now. There's an odd, lesser-known truth about palace life. Rivalries often formed long before anyone had real power. They began here, in waiting rooms and training halls. Fueled by boredom and fear rather than ambition. You feel it settling in. That low-grade awareness of others as potential obstacles. You don't want to think this way. The palace doesn't care what you want. By evening, your head feels crowded with voices you've never spoken to. You sit in your room, rubbing your temples, and briefly imagine what it would be like to complain out loud. The thought is so absurd it almost makes you laugh. You settle for exhaling very quietly instead. As you lie down, you realize something unsettling. You are no longer alone. Even when you are, other women exist in your thoughts now. Hovering just beyond sight, just beyond trust. Tomorrow, you'll learn their names, perhaps, or maybe just their reputations. The palace doesn't need you to see clearly. It only needs you to imagine. And it's very good at giving you material. The idea of night has changed. It used to mean rest, privacy, the small relief of being unobserved. Here, night feels like a held breath. You sense it before anyone says anything, before the lamps are trimmed, before footsteps soften in the corridors. Tonight is different. You don't know how you know. You just do. The palace has moods, and this one is tense in a very specific way. You're told, finally, what everyone else already seems to know. Your name has been added to a list. Not a long list, not an important one, at least not yet. Just a narrow strip of paper handled with exaggerated care. This is a historically familiar moment, the rotation of imperial summons. The orderly mechanism by which concubines were invited, or not, to the emperor's presence. Officially, it's routine. Personally, it feels like gravity increasing without warning. Your attendant helps you dress. Slowly, methodically. The silk is heavier than usual. Or maybe that's just your imagination working overtime. She adjusts your sleeves, your hair, your posture. She doesn't say much. When she does, it's practical. Stand straight. Breathe shallow. Don't speak unless spoken to. This advice has been repeated so often it barely registers. But tonight it carries extra weight. Some historians still debate how much agency concubines had during these first summons. Standing here, you suspect the answer is not enough to matter. As you wait, your thoughts spiral in inconvenient directions. You wonder if you're supposed to feel grateful, nervous, excited. The palace doesn't provide emotional guidelines. So you improvise. You settle on calm, because panic would be exhausting and enthusiasm feels risky. You imagine explaining this moment to someone from your old life and almost laugh. Yes, I'm terrified, but politely. The corridor you walk through is dim, lit by lanterns that throw soft, untrustworthy shadows. Every step echoes just enough to remind you that you're moving closer to something you can't opt out of. This is a well-known historical setting, the inner chambers designed for privacy and control. But what's less often mentioned is how deliberately disorienting they are. Turns, screens, pauses. You lose any sense of direction. The palace wants you focused inward, not on escape routes. You stop behind a screen. Again with the screens. They're everywhere, like the palace's favorite metaphor. You wait. Waiting becomes an activity rather than a pause. You regulate your breathing, your hands, your expression, even though no one can see you yet. You're performing for an audience that hasn't arrived. When the summons finally comes, it's understated, a signal, a gesture, no dramatic announcement. You step forward because that's what happens next. The room beyond is larger than you expected, but emptier. The emperor is there, yes, but so is the weight of expectation. Thick enough to feel like humidity. You bow exactly as you were taught. You don't look up right away. Looking too soon would suggest curiosity. Looking too late would suggest fear. You thread the needle, or at least you hope you do. This is where history tends to zoom out. But you're stuck in the details. The way your knees press into the floor. The faint scent of incense mixed with something medicinal. The sound of fabric moving that isn't yours. You respond when addressed. Your voice behaves, which feels like a minor miracle. You keep your answers brief, neutral, acceptable. There's a strange, rarely discussed truth about these encounters. Many were deeply unremarkable. No sweeping romance, no dramatic declarations, just ritual layered on ritual. You realize, with a flicker of dark humor, that you've been more nervous for job interviews. That thought almost trips you up. Almost. When it's over, whenever over becomes applicable, you're dismissed as gently as you were summoned. No explanation, no feedback. You retreat the way you came, guided by someone who avoids eye contact as if it might be contagious. By the time you return to your room, your body feels hollowed out, like something important was removed without telling you what it was. You sit on the bed, still fully dressed, staring at nothing. Did you do well? Poorly? Does it matter? Favor, you're learning, is a currency with an exchange rate that changes hourly. Some historians still debate whether early impressions truly shaped long-term outcomes. Right now, you're too tired to care about the answer. Eventually, you lie down. Sleep comes unevenly, fractured by half-dreams and replayed moments. You wake once, heart racing, then settle again. Tomorrow, the palace will react, or it won't. Both possibilities feel equally heavy. As the night deepens, one thought drifts through you. Quiet but persistent. This wasn't a climax. It was an introduction. And introductions, here, are rarely kind. Morning arrives with the same stubborn indifference as always. No bells of celebration, no whispers of congratulations. If last night mattered, the palace is in no hurry to prove it. You wake with that peculiar combination of soreness and alertness. Like your body stayed on duty while you slept. For a moment, you wonder if today will be different. Then you remember where you are. And that thought politely excuses itself. Your name is not mentioned at breakfast. Neither praised nor avoided. This, you learn, is intentional. The imperial routine runs on predictability. And unpredictability is reserved for people with real power. You watch attendants move with mechanical precision, distributing food according to rank so subtle it's almost theoretical. A bowl placed a fraction closer. A pause that lasts one heartbeat longer. This is how hierarchy breathes. You begin to understand the emperor less as a man and more as a schedule. His presence in your life is filtered through rotations, records, and rituals. Historically, this was by design. Emperors were insulated from intimacy by layers of protocol meant to preserve authority and lineage. What's rarely emphasized is how that distance shaped everyone else, turning relationships into appointments and emotions into administrative risks. Some historians still debate whether this system protected the throne or slowly hollowed it out. Standing here, you suspect it did both. Later, you're reminded, gently, repeatedly, that last night does not grant familiarity. You are not to assume recognition. You are not to change your behavior. In fact, you're encouraged to behave exactly as before. The palace dislikes ripples. You comply, because compliance has already proven itself useful. Still, something inside you shifts. You've crossed an invisible line. And even if no one acknowledges it, you feel the tension of standing on the other side. As the day unfolds, you notice how often the emperor's name is spoken without reference to a person. It's always His Majesty's schedule, His Majesty's preference, His Majesty's health, rarely His Majesty said. The emperor exists as an abstraction, an axis around which everyone rotates. It's oddly comforting and deeply unsettling at the same time. You imagine trying to build a friendship around a calendar and almost laugh. In the afternoon, you're assigned a new duty, waiting. Again, this time in a different chamber. Closer to the inner quarters but not close enough to mean anything definitive. You sit for hours, listening to the soft rhythms of palace life. Somewhere, music drifts briefly, then stops. Somewhere else, a voice laughs and is immediately hushed. You remain still, practicing neutrality like it's a profession. There's a lesser-known historical fact that surfaces here. Many concubines spent the majority of their lives waiting for summons that never came. Days folded into years, marked only by ceremonies and seasonal changes. The palace functioned perfectly without most of them. This realization settles in slowly, like a bruise forming after you've forgotten the impact. By evening, exhaustion creeps back in, not dramatic, just steady. You return to your room and remove your hair ornaments carefully, as if they might take offense. In the quiet, you replay the emperor's expression from last night. Searching for meaning, you find none. Meaning, you're starting to understand, is not freely distributed here. As you lie down, you think about how strange it is to be affected by someone who barely registers you. It feels oddly modern. You smile faintly at that thought. Then let it go. Tomorrow, the routine will continue, whether you're ready or not. The palace settles around you again. Vast and uninterested, you drift towards sleep with a new understanding. The emperor's routine will shape your life far more than his attention ever could. By now, you can tell when the air shifts. Not dramatically, nothing here ever does, but subtly. Like a room cooling when someone important has entered without announcing themselves. Favor is in motion again. Not yours. Exactly. Just nearby. And proximity alone is enough to make everyone restless. You learn quickly that favor is not affection. It's closer to a temporary alignment of circumstances. A glance remembered. A tone approved. A night that didn't go poorly enough to erase you. Historically, imperial favor functioned as a form of currency within the inner court. Unofficial but immensely powerful, it determined living conditions, attendance, access. What's less commonly discussed is how unstable that currency was. Inflation happened overnight, devaluation even faster. Some historians still debate whether any concubine truly held secure favor, or whether security itself was an illusion designed to keep everyone compliant. From where you're standing, illusion seems generous. Your daily life adjusts in almost invisible ways. An attendant responds a bit faster. Your tea arrives slightly warmer. These are not rewards so much as signals. Others notice. Of course they do. You feel their awareness brush against you in corridors. Brief and assessing. No one confronts you. Confrontation would imply certainty. Instead, there's watching, calculating. You begin to understand how a smile can feel like a measurement. There's a moment in the afternoon when you're seated near two women you've seen before but never spoken to. One of them laughs softly at something trivial. The sound lands wrong, too open, too unguarded. You watch her correct herself almost immediately. Lips pressing together, posture adjusting. You file the observation away. This place teaches you to learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to make them yourself. A strange, lesser-known detail about palace politics emerges here. Alliances often formed not out of affection, but out of synchronized vulnerability. Two people ignored at the same time. Two people favored briefly, then dropped. Shared timing created bonds more reliably than shared interests. You don't seek this out. It finds you anyway, hovering in the pauses between interactions. By evening, rumors begin their quiet rounds. You don't hear them directly. You hear echoes, tone changes. Glances held a fraction too long. Someone mentions your name in passing, then immediately mentions something else. That's how you know it matters. Favor doesn't need confirmation. It announces itself through discomfort. You sit alone later, hands folded, thinking about how absurd it all is. Somewhere outside this palace, people are choosing partners based on affection, arguing over dinner plans, complaining about weather. You're here, evaluating the temperature of tea like it's a performance review. The comparison almost makes you smile. Almost. As night settles in, you realize something quietly alarming. Part of you wants the favor to continue. Not because it brings joy, but because it brings clarity. Being wanted, even temporarily, is easier than being forgotten. The palace excels at exploiting that instinct. You lie down, eyes open in the dark, listening to distant movement. Favor may come, it may go. Either way, it will leave a mark. And tomorrow, you'll wake up and pretend you don't care which direction it chooses. The palace, ever practical, watches you learn this lesson without comment. The embroidery room smells faintly of starch and old patience. Thread glints softly in the lamplight. All of it arranged with an order that feels reassuring until you realize how sharp the needles are. You take your place among the others. Hands folded, posture already corrected before anyone needs to say a word. This is supposed to be calming. It almost works. Embroidery is framed as refinement, a traditionally celebrated skill of palace women. Historically, it was both pastime and performance, proof of diligence, taste, and restraint. What's less advertised is how easily it becomes a battlefield. Every stitch is an opportunity to signal superiority or sabotage. You're taught patterns that look identical at a glance, but differ in ways only insiders notice. A leaf angled just so. A color choice that implies access to better dyes. You learn to see insults woven in silk. Across from you, a woman works with serene confidence. Her stitches are flawless, almost smug. You recognize her voice from behind a screen days ago, sharp, assured. She doesn't look at you, which somehow feels intentional. You focus on your own work, guiding the thread through fabric, counting breaths. One mistake would be obvious. Two would be remembered. There's a well-known historical truth here. Palace crafts were often used to occupy concubines' time and reinforce hierarchy. What's rarely mentioned is how those crafts doubled as communication. Patterns passed messages. Motifs hinted at alliances. You notice a flower stitched where tradition suggests a bird. Interesting. Risky. You pretend not to notice. Some historians still debate how widespread these coded exchanges were. But judging by the tension in the room, widespread enough. A small incident ripples through the afternoon. Someone's thread snaps. It's loud in the quiet, like a dropped plate in a restaurant. Heads lift briefly, then lower. The woman's face remains composed, but her hands tremble just enough to give her away. No one laughs. No one helps. Assistance could be interpreted as pity or worse. Alignment. You keep stitching. So does everyone else. The palace approves of this response. Later, you discover your own work has been subtly altered. A color swapped while you weren't looking. It's minor, plausible as an accident. You stare at it, pulse steady, mind racing. Confrontation would be disastrous. Fixing it quietly will take hours. You choose the long route. This is how rivalry works here, not loud, not direct, but persistent, like water wearing down stone. There's an odd, almost humorous realization that sneaks up on you. You are now in a passive-aggressive war conducted entirely through floral motifs. Somewhere, a modern office worker is nodding in recognition. The thought makes you smile faintly before you stop yourself. Smiling without reason can attract attention. As evening approaches, the room empties with careful politeness. No goodbyes, no acknowledgments. You carry your embroidery back to your room. Hands aching, shoulders tight. You lay the fabric out and study it one last time. It looks beautiful. It also looks dangerous. When you lie down that night, your fingers still remember the pull of thread. Rivalry, you realize, doesn't always announce itself with threats. Sometimes it arrives dressed as art, smiling pleasantly, waiting for you to slip. The palace, ever subtle, teaches this lesson with silk and silence. Sleep doesn't come easily tonight. It lingers just out of reach, like a thought you almost remember but never quite catch. When you do drift off, it's shallow and crowded with half-formed images, screens, needles, faces without mouths. You wake with the uncomfortable sense that something is wrong, even though nothing has happened yet. This, you're learning, is how the palace prefers to operate. By mid-morning, you hear the whispers. Not directly, of course. No one ever whispers to you. They whisper near you, around you, as if your presence is merely architectural. The tone is careful, hushed, practiced. You catch fragments. A name that isn't yours. A word like improper. Another like disrespect. The palace doesn't need to accuse you personally. It only needs to demonstrate possibility. Historically, punishment within the inner court ranged widely. From social exclusion to physical discipline, the system thrived on uncertainty. Clear rules are easy to follow. Vague ones keep people anxious. You notice how often people glance at doors now. How conversations stop when someone unexpected passes. Some historians still debate whether this ambiguity was intentional policy or just a byproduct of bureaucratic sprawl. Either way, it works. At midday, a small demonstration is staged, not announced as such, but unmistakable. A woman is escorted past you. Expression blank, posture perfect. She's not crying. That's the point. You don't know what she did. You're not supposed to. The lesson isn't about her mistake. It's about your imagination filling in the gaps. The palace trusts your fear to do most of the work. Later, an attendant mentions a rule you didn't know existed. Casually, as if it's always been there. You nod and thank her, filing it away under potential future disasters. There are many entries in that category now. You wonder how anyone ever felt safe here. Then you realize safety was never part of the offering. There's a strange, lesser-known fact about palace punishments. Many were designed to be reversible. Temporary confinement, reduced rations, isolation. The goal wasn't elimination, it was correction. You're not meant to disappear. You're meant to remember. Some historians still debate whether this made the system more humane or more cruel. From your perspective, it feels like being slowly trained rather than broken outright. As evening approaches, the tension doesn't ease. It settles. You move carefully, speak less, listen more. Even your thoughts feel monitored, which is impressive considering no one can actually hear them. You catch yourself rehearsing explanations for mistakes you haven't made yet. That seems healthy. In your room, you sit quietly, replaying the day. Nothing happened to you. That's the headline. And yet, your shoulders ache like you've been bracing for impact for hours. You think about the woman who was escorted away. You don't know her name. You decide not to try to find out. Curiosity is a luxury item here. When you finally lie down, you keep the lights low, as if darkness itself might report on you. The palace hums softly around you. Satisfied, you've learned something important today. Punishment doesn't have to arrive to be effective. The anticipation alone can reshape your entire behavior. As sleep eventually claims you, one thought drifts through, heavy and quiet. Fear. Here is not a reaction, it's infrastructure. The smell of herbs becomes impossible to ignore once you're told to notice it. Bitter, earthy, faintly sweet, medicine. Apparently, you're summoned not for punishment or favor, but for maintenance. Which sounds reassuring until you remember where you are. Health in the palace is not personal. It's logistical. You're seated among others while attendants prepare small porcelain bowls filled with dark liquid. No one asks what you're feeling. No one asks if you're ill. The assumption is that everyone is always slightly unwell. Historically, imperial courts relied heavily on traditional medicine, blending practical treatments with superstition and symbolism. Remedies were prescribed not just for symptoms, but for balance, temperament, even perceived moral state. What's rarely emphasized is how little choice you had in accepting them. You lift the bowl when instructed. The surface trembles slightly. Not because your hands are shaking. You tell yourself, but because the liquid is hot. You drink carefully. The taste lingers unpleasantly, coating your mouth. An attendant watches your expression with professional interest. As if recording data, some historians still debate how effective these treatments actually were. From your perspective, effectiveness feels secondary to obedience. Later, You're warned, quietly, about certain combinations of foods and medicines. What not to eat, when not to sleep, which emotions might disrupt harmony. It's impressive how quickly personal responsibility is assigned to outcomes you don't control. If you fall ill, you failed to balance yourself correctly. The palace finds this logic very convenient. In the afternoon, rumors circulate about someone who reacted badly to a tonic. No details, just enough to make everyone swallow more carefully the next time. There's an odd fact tucked into palace history here. Some remedies contained ingredients we'd now consider dangerous, heavy metals. Rare animal parts, things chosen for symbolism rather than safety. You think about modern warning labels and almost laugh. Almost. By evening, your stomach feels unsettled, your head light, you're told this is normal. Adjustment takes time, you nod, because nodding has become second nature. Back in your room, you sit very still, waiting to see if anything worse happens. It doesn't, not tonight. As you lie down, you realize something quietly disturbing. Even your body is no longer fully yours. Its rhythms, its chemistry, its care, all managed by a system that values stability over comfort. Tomorrow, you'll drink whatever they give you again. The palace believes harmony can be enforced. You're starting to believe it might be right. Time stretches in an unfamiliar way now. Weeks pass without clear markers, measured instead by ceremonies you attend and meals that arrive with mechanical regularity. You begin to realize something is missing, not dramatically, not urgently, but persistently. There are no whispers about you, no subtle shifts in attention, no new expectations. This absence becomes its own presence. You notice it first during a routine check, when an attendant's eyes linger just long enough to confirm what everyone already suspects. Nothing has changed. In the palace, this is information, historically, producing an heir, or at least the possibility of one, was the most direct path to relevance for a concubine. Without it, time works against you. Fertility here is not private. It's monitored, discussed, quietly evaluated. Some historians still debate how accurate these assessments were. But accuracy was less important than perception. No one says the word, childless. They don't have to. It lives in the pauses. In the way instructions stop arriving. In how you're seated a little farther from the center during gatherings. You're still included. That's the trick. Exclusion would be obvious. This is more refined. You fade without disappearing. There's a strange, rarely discussed fact about palace life. Many women spent years in a state of conditional relevance. Not punished, not favored. Simply waiting for a possibility that grew less likely with each passing season. You feel that reality settle into your bones. It's not painful exactly. It's dull, which somehow feels worse. In the quiet of your room, you think about how modern conversations treat waiting as temporary. Here, waiting is an identity. You practice patience the way you once practiced embroidery, carefully, repeatedly, hoping no one notices the strain. As night comes, you accept something you hadn't wanted to name before. The palace has begun to move on without you. And it's very good at pretending that's normal. The seasons announce themselves loudly in the outer world. But here they arrive muted. Filtered through ceremony. You don't feel spring so much as you observe it. A change in fabric weight. A shift in colors arranged on long tables. A new set of rituals that everyone pretends has always been your favorite. Today's is one of those seasonal observances performed with precision and very little joy. You're dressed according to the calendar, not the weather. The silk is lighter now. The pattern's symbolic, the instructions exact. You kneel when told, rise when signaled, bow at angles that have been calculated centuries before you were born. This is a well-documented feature of imperial life. Ceremonies meant to align heaven, earth, and ruler. They're impressive in scale and deeply reassuring to the bureaucracy. What they are not is personal. You are an accessory to cosmic order, easily replaced if chipped. As the ceremony unfolds, incense curls upward, carrying prayers no one here actually expects to be answered. You recite lines you've memorized without ever being told what they mean. Meaning, like choice, is optional. Some historians still debate whether participants believed in the spiritual power of these rites or merely complied with tradition. From where you're kneeling, belief feels beside the point. Precision is what matters. You catch yourself thinking about how strange it is that so much effort goes into marking time while so little goes into acknowledging the people moving through it. Faces blur, names fade, only the ritual remains intact. Polished by repetition, you wonder how many women knelt in this exact spot before you. Wearing nearly identical silk, thinking nearly identical thoughts. The idea is oddly comforting and deeply unsettling at the same time. There's a small, lesser-known detail you notice during the procession. Certain participants are positioned closer to the center. Others carefully edged outward. The shift is subtle enough to deny, obvious enough to feel. Placement is communication. You read your position and understand the message without resentment. Resentment would require energy you no longer waste. Afterward, you're dismissed without comment. No praise for correct posture. No correction either. You've achieved the ideal state, adequate. In your room, you remove the ceremonial garments slowly, folding them just so they'll be worn again next year by someone else. Perhaps, the thought makes you smile faintly. Recycling, imperial style. As evening settles, you realize the ceremony did its job. The season has changed. You remain the same. The palace is satisfied with this outcome. Power, you discover, rarely announces itself. It clears its throat softly and waits for everyone else to listen. Today, that power wears plain robes and moves without ceremony. The eunuchs pass through the corridors with an ease you envy. Neither hurried nor hesitant, they belong here in a way few others do. Historically, eunuchs occupied a unique and controversial position in Imperial China. Officially servants, unofficially gatekeepers, they controlled access to information, schedules, and people. What's less openly discussed is how their permanence contrasted sharply with the replaceability of concubines. Emperors changed, favorites rotated, eunuchs remained. Some historians still debate whether their influence was exaggerated by later accounts. But no one disputes their proximity to real authority. You learn to watch them the way sailors watch tides. A nod granted, a message delayed, a door opened or not. None of it is accidental. One eunuch pauses near you today. Eyes unreadable. He says nothing. You say nothing. This exchange feels significant anyway. You will think about it later, replaying his expression for clues. There are none. In the afternoon, a request you submit, routine. Minor moves faster than expected. Not fast enough to seem suspicious, but fast enough to be noticed. You thank the attendant who delivers the response. She shrugs, glancing toward the corridor. You understand. Gratitude should be aimed higher, or not expressed at all. The palace prefers debts without receipts. There's a strange, lesser-known fact about eunuch power networks. They often function through favors too small to document. Timing adjustments, quiet warnings, selective forgetfulness. You realize how easily a life could be nudged in one direction or another without ever appearing in records. Some historians still debate whether this made the system more efficient or more corrupt. From your position, it simply makes it opaque. As evening approaches, you notice a shift in how people speak around eunuchs. Softer, shorter, smiles appear, then vanish. You practice this too, adjusting your tone, your posture. You don't aim to impress. You aim to be unproblematic. Survival, at this stage, is about not standing out in the wrong direction. In your room that night, you reflect on the day. You haven't gained power. You haven't lost it either. But you've identified where it pools. Knowledge like that is dangerous. But ignorance is worse. Tomorrow, you'll tread a little more carefully around certain corridors. The palace doesn't reward insight. It simply punishes the lack of it. Defiance, you learn, doesn't always look like rebellion. Here, it looks like timing, like choosing when not to react, like letting a silence stretch one heartbeat longer than expected. These are not grand gestures. They wouldn't survive 5 minutes in a history book. But they survive here, which feels more impressive. Today, you're assigned a task that is beneath notice and above complaint. Relocating small objects in a shared space. Screens, cushions, low tables, the sort of work meant to keep hands busy and minds obedient. You comply, of course. But you comply thoughtfully. You place things exactly where they were supposed to be yesterday. Not where someone casually suggested this morning. It's subtle, plausible, and oddly satisfying. You've followed the rules so precisely that they contradict a whim. The palace hates whims. There's a well-known historical pattern embedded in this behavior. Concubines who survived longest often mastered passive resistance. Not refusal, redirection. Not protest, precision. What's less often discussed is how exhausting this vigilance was. Every small choice becomes strategic. You measure outcomes like a chess player who isn't allowed to see the board. Some historians still debate whether these acts counted as agency at all. You don't bother with definitions. You bother with consequences. In the afternoon, you're corrected for something you didn't do wrong. The attendant's tone is apologetic. Which is new. She explains a preference that contradicts yesterday's instruction. You nod, adjust, thank her. Later, when no one is watching, you quietly restore the original arrangement. It will be noticed. It will also be deniable. This is the sweet spot. You notice others doing similar things now that you know how to look. A woman delays a bow by a fraction of a second, just enough to assert memory. Another chooses a neutral color when brighter ones were implied. These are not accidents. They are signals sent into the void, hoping someone, anyone, will recognize them, or at least not punish them. There's a strange, lesser-known detail about palace life. Boredom often created space for ingenuity. When you are denied large choices, you become very creative with small ones. You feel that creativity flicker now. Careful and controlled, it doesn't make you brave. It makes you attentive. By evening, you're tired in a new way. Not worn down, but wound tight. You return to your room and sit for a long time before moving. You think about how resistance here isn't loud enough to hear, but it's constant enough to feel, like water pressing against stone. As you lie down, you allow yourself one quiet satisfaction. You existed today on your own terms. However narrow they were. Tomorrow, the palace will continue pretending it doesn't notice. You know better. The illness doesn't announce itself politely. It arrives the way exhaustion does, quietly at first. Then all at once, you wake with a heaviness behind your eyes. A dull ache that refuses to localize. Nothing dramatic, no collapse. Just enough discomfort to make every movement feel negotiated. You consider ignoring it. That's been working so far. By midday, ignoring becomes impractical. An attendant notices the pallor you forgot to hide and tilts her head the way people do when they've already decided something. You're escorted, not urgently, but firmly, to a quieter room where the air smells stronger of herbs and boiled water. This is a familiar historical moment. Sudden illnesses in the inner palace. Recorded vaguely, treated efficiently, rarely explained. What's less often discussed is how illness here functions as a test. Not of health, but of relevance. You sit while someone takes your pulse with exaggerated care. Fingers press, pause, shift. The diagnosis is delivered in abstractions. Imbalance, fatigue, seasonal weakness. Words that sound reassuring until you realize they apply to everyone and no one. Some historians still debate whether palace medicine aimed to cure or simply manage appearances. From where you're sitting, management feels like the priority. You're given another tonic, thicker this time, and told to rest. Rest, you learn, does not mean privacy. It means being observed at a slower pace. People come and go, checking on you with professional neutrality. No one lingers. Lingering implies concern. Concern implies investment. You try not to want it. As hours pass, you become aware of something colder than the illness itself: absence. No messages, no inquiries from higher ranks. The palace has noticed you're unwell, but it hasn't noticed you. There's a difference, and it lands heavily. Historically, this was a dangerous realization. A sick concubine without favor was a logistical inconvenience, not a priority. You understand this without being told. There's a strange, lesser-known fact that settles in here. Some women recovered quickly and returned unchanged. Others never quite did. Illness marked them, not physically, but administratively. They were remembered as frail, a word that traveled faster than any symptom. You imagine that label hovering nearby, waiting to attach itself. By evening, your strength returns enough for you to be sent back to your room. No ceremony, no reassurance. You walk slowly, aware of how visible weakness can be. In your room, you lie down fully dressed. Too tired to care. The ceiling looks farther away tonight. As sleep finally pulls you under, one thought repeats, steady and unwelcome. Here, even sickness has a hierarchy. And you are learning exactly where you fall within it. The recovery is quiet, which is how the palace prefers its outcomes. You wake feeling better, stronger, steadier, but not noticed. No one congratulates you on returning to health. No one marks the day. The absence of acknowledgement feels intentional, like a door left closed not out of malice, but habit. You realize something by mid-morning. Your name isn't being said anymore. Not casually, not indirectly. The lists still exist. Of course, attendance, meals, duties, but the other list, the one that matters, has moved on without you. The rotation of summons continues like clockwork, and your name never rises to the surface. This is a historically familiar pattern. Concubines who lost favor often didn't fall dramatically, they were simply skipped. Some historians still debate whether this gradual erasure was kinder than direct dismissal. It doesn't feel kind, it feels efficient. Your days simplify. Fewer instructions, more waiting. You are not punished. That would require attention. Instead, you are left alone just enough to notice. You sit in shared spaces where conversations happen around you rather than with you. People are polite. Politeness, you're learning, is not the same as inclusion. It's a buffer. There's a strange, lesser-known fact about palace hierarchies. Neglect was one of the most powerful tools available. It required no effort, no justification. A woman without summons consumed fewer resources and fewer thoughts. You feel this truth settle into your routine. Meals arrive on time, clothing is adequate, everything necessary is provided, nothing more. In the afternoon, you overhear a name being called. Not yours. Someone newer, younger. You don't look up. Looking would acknowledge the shift. You keep your hands folded. Posture perfect. Expression neutral. This is what survival looks like now. Mastery of disappointment without display. Somewhere, a modern self-help book would call this resilience. You'd call it adaptation. As evening comes, you return to your room earlier than usual. No one notices. You sit in the fading light, thinking about how quickly relevance evaporates here. It doesn't fight. It doesn't argue. It just leaves. When you lie down, the silence feels different, not tense, empty. And for the first time, you wonder, not dramatically, not urgently, how many more years this kind of quiet could stretch. The palace doesn't answer. It never does. The presence of the dowager is never announced directly. It's inferred, a change in tone, a tightening of schedules, a pause where there wasn't one before. You feel it ripple through the inner court long before you see her influence made visible. This is how power that doesn't need proof behaves. You don't encounter her in person, not today, but her shadow is unmistakable. An instruction is revised, a privilege quietly revoked, a decision made elsewhere and attributed to tradition. Historically, the Empress Dowager often wielded immense authority, sometimes exceeding that of the Emperor himself. What's less openly discussed is how her power seeped into daily life through layers of intermediaries. Some historians still debate whether this indirect rule made her influence stronger or simply harder to challenge. From where you stand, harder to challenge feels accurate. Your routine adjusts again, nothing drastic, just enough to remind everyone who ultimately sets the tone. Conversations shorten, laughter becomes rare and oddly placed. Like it's been scheduled, you notice that even eunuchs tread more carefully now. Eyes flicking toward corners as if authority might materialize there without warning. In the afternoon, you're reassigned to a different space, still within the inner court, but farther from the center. The explanation is bland, practical. You don't argue. Arguing would suggest you believe your position is negotiable. It isn't. You pack your few belongings with practiced efficiency, aware that movement itself is a message. You are being reorganized. There's a strange, lesser-known detail about Dowager rule. It often relied on memory. Long grudges, old alliances, things done decades ago resurfaced quietly, reframed as precedent. You wonder, briefly, if you've offended someone without knowing it. The thought passes. If that's the case, there's nothing to be done now. The palace doesn't accept apologies for unknown crimes. By evening, the new space feels colder. Not physically, emotionally. Fewer passers-by, less noise. This is where people go when they are still necessary but no longer interesting. You sit, hands folded, posture perfect, and wait. Waiting has become a skill you've nearly mastered. As you lie down that night, you think about how power here doesn't crush people outright. It rearranges them, slides them into quieter corners. The Dowager doesn't need to know your name for this to work. Sleep comes slowly, carrying the heavy understanding that even unseen authority can shape the rest of your life with remarkable precision. Rumors arrive before breakfast, slipping into the room the way cold air finds cracks in a window. No one tells you anything directly. They don't need to. You hear it in the way conversations stall when you approach, then resume a little too loudly once you pass. Someone is being discussed. It might be you. It might not. The palace doesn't bother clarifying. You learn quickly that rumors don't require truth, only repetition. Historically, inner court gossip functioned as both entertainment and enforcement. It filled long hours and quietly shaped reputations. What's less often acknowledged is how intentionally vague these stories were. Specifics invited contradiction. Generalities lingered. Some historians still debate whether rumor was a spontaneous social phenomenon or subtly encouraged from above. From where you're standing, it feels curated. By midday, a detail reaches you secondhand. Something about attitude, about failing to show proper gratitude. You replay recent interactions, searching for the offense. Nothing stands out. That's the danger. If the accusation were concrete, you could respond to it. This floats. You adjust your behavior anyway, smaller movements, softer tone, extra restraint. The palace rewards people who correct themselves without being told. There's a strange, lesser-known fact about survival here. Denial is rarely effective, but alignment often is. You don't confront the rumor. You outgrow it, or at least you try to. You become so unobjectionable that the story loses traction. This takes time. Rumors don't starve easily. In the afternoon, you witness someone else being gently cornered by whispers. Her smile is too tight. Her posture too rigid. You recognize the signs. You don't intervene. Intervention would suggest solidarity, and solidarity is dangerous. This realization leaves a faint sour taste in your mouth. You swallow it along with everything else. As evening approaches, the rumor doesn't vanish. It simply moves on. That, you learn, is the best possible outcome. You are no longer the most interesting possibility. Relief arrives mixed with something like shame. You accept both without comment. When you lie down that night, the day feels oddly draining. Despite nothing tangible happening, words, you realize, can bruise without touching. The palace knows this. It uses it often. Sleep comes eventually. carrying you into a quieter space where whispers lose their edges. For now, that's enough. Hope returns the way it left, without asking permission. You sense it before you can justify it. A faint tightening in the air that suggests movement somewhere beyond your corner. A name is mentioned near you. Not yours. Then, later, yours is mentioned near someone important. That's how it starts. Not with an announcement, but with circulation. You're summoned for something small. Trivial. Almost. An adjustment in routine. A request for presence rather than participation. Historically, these minor summons often preceded shifts in favor. Like test taps before a heavier knock. What's rarely discussed is how carefully they were calibrated. Too much attention would raise suspicion. Too little would go unnoticed. Some historians still debate whether these early signals were intentional or coincidental. Right now, coincidence feels generous. You prepare with measured restraint. No visible excitement. No unnecessary polish. The palace punishes eagerness as quickly as indifference. When you arrive, the atmosphere is neutral, polite, efficient, almost boring. That's a good sign. Boredom here often means safety. You take your place, respond when spoken to, and keep your tone steady. Inside, your thoughts are doing laps. There's a moment, brief, almost theoretical, when someone of rank looks at you a second longer than required. Not warmly, not critically, just attentively. You catalog it instantly, the way you catalog everything now. This might mean nothing, it might mean everything. You refuse to decide. A lesser-known truth about palace favor surfaces here. Returns were rarely triumphant. There were no apologies, no explanations. You weren't back. You were simply included again. Some historians still debate whether this cycle of loss and partial restoration was intentional psychological management. From your perspective, it feels like being gently tested for usefulness. As the day ends, you notice the smallest shifts. A seat marginally closer. An attendant waiting instead of walking away immediately. These are crumbs, but crumbs here are currency. You accept them carefully, making sure not to appear hungry. Hunger is visible. Hunger is dangerous. That night, lying in the dark, you let yourself consider the possibility, not the promise, of relevance. It's not joy you feel. It's tension. Hope, you realize, is not comforting here. It's activating. Sleep comes late, light and watchful. Tomorrow may confirm this change, or erase it completely. The palace hasn't decided yet. The word marriage floats through the inner court with surprising weight, even though it rarely applies to you directly. Today, it's discussed in careful fragments: political unions, strategic alliances, distant princesses sent closer, closer women sent farther away. You listen from the edges. As usual, piecing together a picture no one intends to show you whole. Imperial marriage is not romance. It's architecture. Historically, these unions stabilized borders, secured loyalty, and balanced factions. The inner palace absorbed the consequences quietly. New women arrived, old routines shifted, favor redistributed itself like water finding a new slope. What's less often discussed is how concubines existed as the flexible margin in this system, adjusted, displaced, or ignored to make room for strategy. Some historians still debate whether concubines were politically irrelevant or quietly essential. From where you sit, Essential but expendable feels closest. You notice preparations beginning long before any announcement. Silk allocations change. Training schedules tighten. Certain names appear more often in conversation. Not yours. That's fine. You've learned that proximity to upheaval is often more dangerous than distance from it. You remain steady, present, non-threatening. This is your best contribution. In the afternoon, you're asked a question that sounds harmless: your place of origin. Restated for clarity, you answer calmly, though the inquiry feels diagnostic rather than curious. The palace gathers information the way it breathes, continuously. Quietly. You don't know what the information will be used for. Only that it will be used. Some historians still debate how much individual data influenced political decisions. You suspect it mattered most when it justified decisions already made. As evening approaches, the atmosphere grows oddly anticipatory. People move with purpose, but without urgency. This is planning, not reaction. You think about how little control you have over outcomes that will shape your daily life. It's oddly freeing. Responsibility is minimal when agency is limited. You almost enjoy that thought before dismissing it as dangerous optimism. When night falls, you lie down listening to distant activity, papers shuffled, doors opened and closed, voices lowered rather than raised. The palace is rearranging itself again. Tomorrow, something will be different. It always is. You close your eyes, accepting the familiar truth. Here, marriages decide futures, and your future will be decided in their shadow. Whether you're invited into the conversation or not. Trust is not something the palace encourages. It allows it, occasionally. The way a garden allows weeds when pulling them would cause more disruption than leaving them alone. Today, against all sensible instincts, you find yourself drifting toward one such allowance. It starts with proximity, shared routines, sitting near the same person during long, silent hours. She doesn't speak much, neither do you. That's how it works. Words would ruin the balance. Over time, small acknowledgments form: a nod, a shared glance, the mutual decision to look away at the same moment. This is intimacy here, not warmth, but recognition. Historically, concubines sometimes formed quiet bonds for survival, sharing information, resources, or simply the burden of awareness. What's less discussed is how risky these relationships were. Loyalty could be weaponized. Secrets could be sold. Some historians still debate whether such alliances increased survival rates or merely delayed inevitable fallout. You decide not to debate it. You decide to be careful. One afternoon, she sits closer than usual. The space between you narrows enough to feel intentional. She murmurs a warning, just one sentence. Barely audible. About a schedule change. About a name you should avoid being associated with. You nod once. That's the entire exchange. It leaves your pulse elevated for an hour. There's a strange, lesser-known fact about trust here. It often arrives disguised as usefulness. People confide not because they like you, but because you're positioned conveniently. You accept this without resentment. Convenience is still a form of being chosen. As days pass, the pattern continues. She offers small pieces of information. You respond with discretion. Neither of you asks for more. This restraint feels mature. It also feels like standing on thin ice and agreeing not to mention the temperature. You both understand the rules. That helps. In the evening, Alone in your room, you consider the risk you're taking. Attachment creates leverage for both sides. You weigh that against isolation, which offers safety at the cost of erasure. You choose the risk carefully, because complete invisibility has its own dangers. As you lie down, you think about how rare it is to feel seen without being evaluated. It doesn't make you hopeful. It makes you steadier. In this place, that might be the most valuable thing of all. The fall, when it comes, is almost elegant. No shouting, no confrontation, just a small misalignment that hardens into fact before anyone thinks to soften it. You sense it early in the day, in the way instructions arrive pre-adjusted, as if your response has already been anticipated and dismissed. It's something minor. Of course it is. A timing issue. Being present where you were expected to be elsewhere. Or perhaps being absent when presence was implied rather than stated. The palace excels at this kind of ambiguity. Historically, many recorded offenses in the inner court were vague enough to resist challenge. Impropriety, disrespect, poor judgment. Some historians still debate whether these labels described real actions or merely convenient conclusions. Standing here, you suspect the conclusion came first. No one accuses you directly. That would create a moment. Instead, access shifts. A door takes longer to open. A message fails to reach you. The people who once paused to acknowledge you now move smoothly past. The system has updated. You were not consulted. You think briefly of your confidant, where she might stand in this recalibration. You don't look for her. Looking would confirm association, and association is now dangerous. This is how the palace fractures bonds without breaking them outright. Clean, efficient. You admire it in the way one admires a well-made trap. By afternoon, your reassignment is finalized. A different set of duties. A different space. Still respectable. Still contained. This is not exile. This is demotion with manners. You accept it without visible reaction. Which is noted somewhere. You're sure. Composure is the last asset no one can confiscate. There's a lesser-known truth about these falls from grace. They were often irreversible not because of severity, but because of momentum. Once attention moved away, it rarely circled back. The palace dislikes revisiting decisions. Some historians still debate whether redemption was possible at all. You don't waste time on the question. Energy is better spent adapting. As evening comes, you sit alone longer than usual. The quiet feels heavier now, layered with implication. You think about how carefully you've walked, how little you've demanded. It didn't matter. That realization stings, but only briefly. Pain, like favor, is something you learn to regulate. When you lie down, sleep resists you at first. Then it arrives suddenly, as if your body has decided thinking is no longer productive. As darkness settles, one thought lingers, calm and unadorned, in the palace. Falling doesn't mean failing. It just means being placed where you will be least noticed. And sometimes, least noticed is exactly where they want you. Life narrows without announcing itself. You don't wake up one morning feeling confined. You wake up realizing how few places you now go. The routes you walk repeat with uncanny precision: room, corridor, shared space, back again. The palace hasn't locked you away. It has simply stopped opening doors you once passed through without thinking. This is a historically familiar ending for many women of the inner court. Not disgrace, not punishment, but quiet reassignment. Concubines who fell from favor were often relocated to less central quarters. Their lives reduced to routine maintenance of existence. What's less discussed is how intentional this narrowing was. Fewer interactions meant fewer risks, for the palace. Not for you. Some historians still debate whether such confinement was meant as mercy or neglect. It feels like both, applied without consultation. Your days are calm now. Too calm. You're given tasks that require time but not thought. Folding, sorting, sitting, waiting especially. The hours stretch, elastic and shapeless. You mark time by sounds. The clatter of distant trays. The soft shuffle of feet that never pause outside your door. The palace still functions perfectly. You are no longer part of its interesting machinery. Occasionally, you hear news. A birth, a promotion, a punishment delivered elsewhere. These events float past you like clouds seen through a narrow window. You note them without reaction. Reaction implies relevance. You have learned to ration that. There's a strange, lesser-known detail about these later years. Many women survived far longer than expected. Precisely because nothing was expected of them anymore. Low visibility came with a kind of protection. You feel it now, a thin, fragile safety built from being forgotten. Some historians still debate whether this quiet longevity should be considered survival or erasure. Lying here, listening to the slow pulse of palace life, you decide the distinction doesn't matter much. Your body adjusts. Your mind, less so. You think more than you used to. Though there's less to think about. Memories surface uninvited. Your old home. The line at dawn, the first screen, the first night of fear dressed as ceremony. These recollections arrive gently, like they've been waiting for you to have time again. As night falls, you lie down earlier than before. There's no reason to stay awake. Tomorrow will be identical. That knowledge should terrify you. Instead, it soothes. Predictability, at this stage, feels like kindness. The palace breathes on, vast and uninterested. You breathe with it, slower now, learning how to exist in a life reduced to quiet continuation. You don't notice the end approaching. That's the palace's final courtesy. There is no announcement, no tightening of rules, no sudden shift in air. Life continues exactly as it has, contained. Quiet, repetitive, until one morning. Getting up feels heavier than usual. Not painful, just slower, as if your body is negotiating terms your mind hasn't been invited to discuss. Age here is subtle. There are no birthdays, no markers. Time accumulates quietly, like dust in corners no one checks anymore. Historically, many concubines lived long lives within the palace walls. Their deaths recorded briefly, if at all. What's less discussed is how administratively neat those endings were. No disruption, no mourning beyond protocol. Some historians still debate whether these women were remembered as individuals or merely as entries in ledgers. You suspect the ledger won. Your days soften further. Tasks are reduced. Expectations fade. You're allowed to rest more often. Not out of kindness, but because efficiency no longer applies to you. An attendant helps you sit. Another brings tea you barely drink. Their faces are polite, distant. You don't resent them. They're just doing what the system taught them. There's an odd, rarely mentioned detail about palace deaths. Many occurred in the same rooms where women had spent decades waiting. Familiar walls. Familiar ceilings. You lie back and study yours, noting a small crack you've never bothered to examine before. It feels appropriate to finally notice it now. Your thoughts drift, unstructured. Memories overlap without urgency. Silk, screens, silence, the strange weight of being watched. Then not watched at all. You think about how little of this life was chosen, and how much of it you still lived anyway. That realization feels important, though you can't say why. Breathing becomes something you're aware of, then something you're gently released from managing. The palace sounds fade, replaced by a softer quiet, one that doesn't demand anything from you. And now, the pace slows even more. The words soften. The images blur. The edges of memory dissolve into warmth rather than fear. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer being evaluated. You are simply resting. Let your shoulders drop. Let the palace recede. Let the story dim like a lantern turned low. There is nothing left for you to do. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to endure. Just sleep now. Deep. Undisturbed. Safe in forgetting. End of script. Sweet dreams.